Shoshana Burgett from colorkarma.com. I am here with Ryan Stanley from PVH.
Hello,
How are you
hello.
today, Ryan?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Ryan is the material and color specialist, innovation specialist at PVH, and we've been doing a whole bunch of series on color and heated color discussions, and it just keeps going as
Good
we
time,
as
yeah.
we continue. Yeah, it's been fun. Today's topic, though, is adjectives for color. We come from a point where we go, well, every color is subjective unless you measure it with something. So when somebody comes up to you and says it's brighter, that's okay. You understand at least what bright is, but what's dusty?
Yeah, I think there's a level of ambiguity when it comes to color name, right? So surprisingly enough, there are groups of designers, some of them love naming colors and sitting down and taking the time and being, creative and luscious lilac and then pretty pink and all these names. Other designers absolutely loathe it. Like they don't just hate it, they loathe it. Um,
Really?
yeah, I mean, because eventually, depending upon how long you do it, if you add up the color libraries, like what, there's, 4,000 Archroma colors, there's 2,000 Pantone colors, there's 3,000 Color Wall CSI colors. Color Row has another, however many thousand colors, and then all the other color standards providers. That's a lot of that's a lot of names. So some of them just become altogether frustrated with it. Yeah.
Yeah, but at the same time, there's a lot of fun. I mean,
Mhm.
OPI with the nail polish, all of them have fun names, you know, Marguerite on the beach and things
Mhm.
of that nature. But it's what does the word convey and make you think of? So luscious pink is one, or,
Oh, yeah, they tell a story with their names.
exactly. But when you're trying to give feedback to somebody, right, you're trying to produce something and they've sent you the samples, you've gotten them now, they've been FedEx to you, and you call this person up and you go, well, it's too watery. What are they supposed to do with that?
Yeah.
Right?
So
That's,
I think now we're talking about, so let's break it into two categories, right? There are innocuous names,
yep.
like just altogether. So if you call a color envy, right?
Hmm.
Right off the top of your hat, some person might think envy is green.
Green.
Another person might think envy is angry, so envy is red. So you've named this color envy, and you're expecting somebody to know what color it is
Exactly.
because you, as a designer or whomever, you have your own perception of what that color is, but that is not the same perception as anyone else. So you
Hmm.
don't know what the color is just by the name. So then you've backed yourself into a level of ambiguity, right?
Absolutely.
Then there's what you just said. So if you're dealing with a color standards provider, or if you're dealing with a custom color provider or a mill and you're trying to get them to match your color, the way that you communicate what you want that color to be. So you've given them your inspiration, wherever that may have come from, and you
Hmm.
want it to be something else. The challenge is using, for a designer especially, and this is where color teams would come in,
Right.
right? Using common color terms. I'd like it to be brighter or duller. I'd like it to
Right.
be yellower, redder, bluer, or greener. I'd like it to be, chromatic versus achromatic. Terms like that, as opposed to what you just what you just said, like
Dusty and
dusty or
muddy and
chirpy or
dirty,
yeah,
or
masculine or feminine. Like, what is that? One could guess, but what does that
right,
really mean? It means different things to different people. Yeah.
right, muted, right?
I would immediately think muted means duller, but for somebody else, muted could be darker. And
Be
dark and
dark.
dull are two different things. Yeah.
D&D, dark and dull. So yeah, so it this whole thing about naming and adjectives, and it brings up again all the emotions around color, right? And I love giving the examples of weddings because I have friends who are from China, and they have the wedding is the beautiful white dress here that we expect in the US, but then they have a whole other flip and the dress turns red and the flowers are white because
Yeah. Colors mean different things in different areas,
different
like,
cultures. Exactly.
purple is like a royal color, or something like that. Or a lot of people like green, in the States or in, Western cultures, whereas green could mean something entirely different in an Eastern culture.
So when designers are working with standards, and people like yourself, right? They can use brighter, they can use darker, they can use their primary colors.
We try to get them to communicate in like execution terminologies, like I said earlier, right? So chromatic, achromatic, brighter, duller, and then using color directions. What we don't, so now we're talking about the execution piece. What
Right.
we don't ever want a designer or a color team, if they're communicating with production, to do is to give direction, right? Because they don't necessarily know how that color is being executed. So if I'm dyeing a black, right,
Hmm.
I'm in the lab, there isn't necessarily a black dye, right? Or that black dye, if there is one, could be made up of multiple components.
Right.
But typically, you're dyeing a sample with three samples or three colorants, right? So like a yellow,
Hmm.
a red, and a blue, and you use those three colors to pull on the depth of the color, the shade of the color in different directions. So if you want something to be bluer, and you go to a mill and you say, "Oh man, I wish this was 20% more blue," then that could very well be interpreted by execution as adding 20% of the blue
Percent more
component.
blue.
And the
Right.
next thing you know, your green color turns into a turquoise,
Yep.
and you're completely away from what you wanted. So it's really just giving generalized directions, slightly to red, back off slightly on the blue. But again,
Right.
giving those LAB kind of coordinate directions to yellow, to red, to blue, to green, lighter, duller, darker, brighter.
Brighter.
Yeah,
And those are really the core adjectives that people should use, right? Because if they're using those things, like we said, is faded or dusty or muddy, we don't know what to do with it. But if you
yeah,
stick to those, basically it was, I think, 6 or 7 we've been continuously saying is,
right.
then you're giving a direction, like go left, go right, go
You're
north,
giving
go
somebody a
south.
latitude and longitude. Yeah, like turn. You're exactly right. Turn right, turn left at the stop sign. Exactly.
Right. And that's really important from a direction when you're working with a supply chain, whether or not the person's in the team in the room next to you or the person's in another country. It's very actionable.
So especially now with COVID and everybody working remotely and not necessarily being able to travel and go directly to the mills and
Yep.
communicate in person what you want. So more and more things, obviously we were communicating by email before, but we're doing it even more so now. And then Zooming or Skyping or whatever with everybody. You really want to make sure that your communication is clear,
Yep.
because you can't go to the supplier anymore, or at least not as frequently as we were able to. And then you get the different languages, right?
Yep.
I'm going from China to India to Vietnam to South America to anywhere else. Words translate differently, so trying to give coordinates makes far more sense.
Words, adjectives, language, emotions, all of that just muddies the water, so to speak. And so using those key directions,
Mhm.
longitude, latitude of color is really important. So that's the first side of the color naming. And
Mhm.
then we can go back to the OPIs and the margarita on the beach color. What color do you think of when you have that, right? And naming of colors. So there are people who love naming
Mhm.
the colors, and
People who do not.
people who do not. I like the names mainly because they stick in my head. I can
Right.
remember it. It's Tangerine Tango. I,
Yeah.
I got it. I remember it, right? Luscious Pink.
See, I'm a
Um,
numbers guy. I am literally the
but
exact opposite. I
you're
am
the
about as
opposite.
yeah. I'm about as far from creative as you can get. I'm math all the way.
But at the same time, it's a different audience,
Yeah.
and it's not a right or wrong. It's how do you communicate it, right? So it's do and which one's better or worse? There's not really a better or worse. It's understanding and how those names come about of avocado green. You know what that looks like.
I would just the piece of advice that I would give to anyone having to name colors is try to use, similar to what we just talked about for execution, right?
Yep.
Try to use common descriptors. Again, we talked about envy, right? I
Right.
want this color to be envy because it's in my envy palette. And, that's the whole theme. But if you just call a color envy, you're not really communicating what that color is.
Color is.
Give it some type of description, dark red, deep red, dark dull bluish, dark dull orange red. Like, obviously you don't want the name to be like a mile long, but at least give a general direction of what that color is. I mean,
Is.
there are around 70 some odd color families with major and minor color group descriptions associated with them. So somewhere along those lines, you can let them know, okay, where am I at? Like, is it
Right.
is it a blue, or is it a green, or is it a red? Like, where am I?
If I told you orange, you wouldn't necessarily know anything about it, right? If I told you Golden Gate Bridge orange, maybe. If I told you koi orange or goldfish orange, right? It starts all of a sudden putting a word to a color to something. So it kind of just, it makes you remember it, but it also kind of puts it in a scope because color is so broad, right? It's
Right.
that whole scale. I mean, even just blacks or oranges, there's just so many variations. So it's that association. What are some of your favorite words for colors?
Oh, I have no idea. God, bubble blue,
Bubble blue.
bubble blue. I've used that as God, for almost over 10 years now, and any random name that I might like have to pull out of my hat for like talking about something, I'll just constantly say bubble blue.
Bubble blue. Fire engine red, I like. Bubblegum pink
Bubblegum
is what
pink.
I use for
All right.
my daughter's hairs. Bubblegum pink. They go, what is that? Bubblegum pink. So, what do you guys do, or what have you seen in the past in some of the companies you've worked with?
Again, yeah, I mean, a lot of the designers that I've worked with across the different organizations and working with color standard, being a part of a color standard provider, I've come across designers who just didn't want to deal with it. Like, they were just over having to name colors because they've named so many.
Right.
So again, I'm not a creative guy. But it's hard for me to sit down. You asked me what my favorite color was. I have one. Like, it's bubble blue. Like, that's it.
It's bubble blue.
Yeah, like the end. So one of the things that I try to do is, um, common quote I'll say again and again, right? We've talked about this time and time
Mhm.
again. Anyone competent in what they do moves to streamline their processes so they can pay attention to a higher class of problems. So I automated it. I put a macro together where I grabbed, like, 3,000, 4,000 some odd adjectives, and designer would come in. They'd give me a color. I'd read it on the spectrophotometer. I'd read it on the colorimeter. It would tell me that it was a medium orange, medium dull orange.
Mhm.
It would stick it in its major minor color group based on the reflectance curve. And then
Right.
I had brackets of adjectives
Mhm.
associated with that. And it would grab it and say, happy dull orange, or ostentatious dull orange, or exciting dull orange. Or, but at least this way, like, I have a descriptive adjective to
Yeah.
give it flair. But then also, like, I'm calling it orange, so people know what the thing is, or at least you have an idea of what, like, where I'm at or what I'm trying to match. So
Right. And that's where, I always go, like you said, bubble blue, or I said tangerine tango. You have an object and a color, so it kind of puts it in some structure and framework of
mhm.
what you're looking at. But it just touches on the emotions people have and describe things and how we interpret things, and that whole religion of color is how I see it is different than how you see it, and different cultures and languages, and it can be very, very heated. And so I think the whole takeaway of this is, yes, naming colors is can be fun for some, not for others. There's always numbers because that's
Mhm.
the science. The names help you, memorize it or know it, and can be a great marketing term. But when you're using adjectives to work with a supplier, you really need to constrain it to what is that directional north-south set of
Oh,
words to give
100%.
to
Yeah.
somebody,
I've worked
right?
with design groups that were specific to certain categories, and you're exactly right. They'd give me the direction for the season. So they'd tell me, this palette is nautically themed, or this, it's a woodsman's palette, or
Right.
they'd give me again, a general concept, a general
Mhm.
direction, and that's what I would use to prune the adjectives. So I'd put a filter on my 4,000 adjectives, based on that criteria, and then it
Mhm.
was selecting from a subset. That way they get now they're telling the story. But again, that's
Right.
my uncreative way to come up with creative names.
It's what you do in your fun time, spare
Yeah.
time. But, it works. And as long as it works, it's fine.
Mhm.
So, well, thank you very much for today's Bubble Blue Tangerine Tango, fun, watery, dusty, colorful conversation.
It was a pleasure.
This is Shoshana Burgett from Color Karma. Thank you very much, Ryan. We'll speak again next time.
Sounds like a plan. Bye.
Take care.